the basic ideas of Kabbalah are already found in the Bible. That is to say, you will see some historians like the great Gershom Scholem will say, so much of this comes from 13th century Europe, Provence and Spain and elsewhere. But the basic ideas really are already there in the Hebrew Bible, amplified by the Talmud and Midrash. In fact, a lot of it is in Genesis chapter 1, specifically the creative power of language. God says, let there be, and things start happening. Let there be light. And it's not only let there be light, God speaks, but just the very Hebrew word, yehi. In Hebrew, it's yehi or, let there be light. And there was light. So the power of speech is foundational in biblical theology, and that's picked up in the Talmud and Midrash, and of course it's carried forward in Kabbalah. But I even want to focus on the word yehi because the letters already are very close to the letters of the four-letter name of God, which I don't attempt to pronounce. That's the ancient tradition, but you know it's a yud and a hey and a vav and a hey, and you already have yehi, let it be, which is very much like the four-letter name of God. Let it be, and it happens somehow through language. And then the other great idea is that humans are made embodied in the image of God. And this was really resisted by the philosophical traditions such as Moses Maimonides and many others. Oh my God, they would say, God does not have a body. That's a terrible, terrible sin to say that. In fact, God does not have a personality. God does not have any of those things. God is way above and beyond. Well, on some level, that has to be true. But on the level of mythopoesis, that is to say, the way we read the Bible, God has personality everywhere. In fact, God has apparently a visible form, maybe not a body as we know it, but Moses wants to see God's physical form. Isaiah sees God in some sort of physical form. Ezekiel has this grand vision of God and the Merkavah, the divine chariot. It's almost everywhere in the physical body. So the Kabbalah returns to that idea of embodiment and physicality and orientation in the physical, but in a very sophisticated way. Okay, so some of the main ideas. The Ein Sof, which is the absolute, beyond the God of personality. So there the Kabbalah agrees with the philosophical tradition and in some sense with the Greek philosophers as well. The absolute is beyond all conception, all understanding. However, for the ultimate mystery is that this absolute wants, already I'm using an anthropomorphism, wanting is a human aspiration, but somehow or other, the absolute moves to embodiment, moves to relationship, moves to creative endeavor. That's the ultimate mystery. That's what is called Keter, the crown, which is above any understanding, but somehow hovers above. I was mentioning to a friend that some of us were following the, I think, entirely justifiable and really noble eulogies for Queen Elizabeth. In the United Kingdom, the governmental umbrella, here it's called the people or the state. In England, it's called the crown. When there's a court case, there is maybe one side, and then there is so the crown is this overwhelming sense of what is the ultimate will or source of the desire to have a creation. And then you have this cascading sequence of emanatory stages, manifestations, which you may well have heard the Kabbalah calls the Sefirot. I'm going to see if I can do a screen share now. Let's see if we actually work. Rosa, if technology doesn't work, that's okay. I'll keep on talking. but let's see. Do you see it on your screen? So, yeah. So you may be familiar with this diagram. It's now somewhat well known to people, but there's a correlation here with the tetragrammaton, that is to say, with the four-letter name of God, which, as I said, already in Second Temple times, over 2,000 years ago, the tradition was that it was too holy to really be pronounced in public. So I'm not going to try to do it, but the Kabbalists see the emergence of the Sefirot inscribed in and symbolized by the four-letter names. And I've chosen a vertical representation. Normally Hebrew is read from right to left. And if you have a Siddur with a four-letter name, it will, of course, be, you will read it, at least you will see it right to left. I've done it, I looked on the internet, frankly, for a visualization where it's vertical, because we tend to think of a cascading sequence from up to down. And so it's useful to think of it in this way. And also in terms of the symbolism, it's really helpful. So what you have here is the Kotso Shel Yud, which really means the tip of the Yud. Now the Yud itself is a jot. Right, though actually, I believe the word jot, J-O-T, J, of course, is really ya in German, so jot is yud. It's really just a jot of a dot. But the beginning of the dot is the ultimate point of emergence. It's what we might call where the Big Bang itself began. So that's the crown of the yud. That's that tip of the yud right there. And the yud is the dot, which is the emanatory emergence of an idea. Then you have the hey. By the way, in Kabbalistic terminology, that is called chokhmah. Chokhmah, kind of wisdom. But the wisdom here is a kind of like light bulb going off, the spark of an idea. Bina is insight, gendered as feminine, sometimes called the womb, the cosmic womb. And it has a kind of cradling shape, with an opening, as you see. Then you have the Vav, which is, some people have called it a phallic symbol, but it can mean the 6 lower Sefirot of emotion. I'll say more about that in just a moment. And then the final Hey Malchut, which is the Sefirah of, again, it's another femininely gendered, Shekhinah, the divine feminine, the place of interface with the world as we know it. So that is the cascading sequence. Again, the ultimate mystery. Why does that first beginning inscription, the dot of the dot, again, to use current physical language, and I'm not saying that physics proves Kabbalah or Kabbalah proves physics, but the parallel is certainly there. That is to say, where does the Big Bang come from? So that's the ultimate mystery. That's the keter. That's the crown. And then you have the point of emanation, going into the womb where it receives protection and nurturance, but also boundaries and gestation. And then moving into the lower levels of various emotional states, and finally the emergence into Malchut, which doesn't really mean kingdom. It's actually receptivity, but receptivity is not passivity. Receptivity is very, very active. So these are some of the major symbols of the Kabbalah, and that's how the Kabbalists in the Zohar and elsewhere correlate the emergent symbolism of the Kabbalistic Sefirot, this is to say the divine manifestations, with the Tetragrammaton, with the 4-letter name of God. And that's how they get, you might wonder, well, the 4-letter name of God has 4 letters, but there are 10 Sefirot. So how do they do it? Answer, well, you see how they make the arrangement here. The ultimate tip of the tip is, again, the ultimate mystery, the dark mystery. It's actually called the dark Sefirah because we don't understand it at all. Keter, the crown, the dot of Chachmah, the womb, W-O-M-B, of Binah, sometimes called the supernal mother. It's one of the things about the Kabbalah that they're not at all shy about speaking about the feminine aspect of the divine, the feminine side of God. So the divine mother here, the six Sefirot of the emotions. Well, I'll say something now about it, actually, briefly. Chesed is love, expansiveness is to say, whether in our emotional life, when we fall in love, there is no limit to our love. And this is true with ideas as well. I often reminisce about, 50 years ago, a while back when I was in graduate school, feminism was all the rage. And it was not only in psychology, but if you did a degree in history or literature or any field in the humanities, even in physics, maybe, you had to somehow find it was everywhere. And then you had computers and the information superhighway. Anybody remember the information superhighway? So the ideas tend to expand. And then somebody says, wait a minute, ideas may explain some things, but they don't explain everything. And if you try to explain everything, you'll wind up sort of just watering down the idea totally. That's gevura. That's the setting of boundaries and limits, which is so significant and so important. When you find the balance, if you find the balance, you have tiferet, which is the beauty of balance. And it's this central position here that you'll see with my arrow, with my cursor, which I tongue-in-cheek call my blesser. Netzach and Hod are on the level of implementation. There's much more to say about that, but again, this is Netzach I translate as commitment. If you're going to get anywhere in the creative process, you have to be committed to your idea, committed to your passions, and at the same time, you have to find limits and you have to find reverberations with your idea. Yesod is where it all comes together in intensity and in pleasure. Malchut, again, is receptivity, but not to be confused with passivity. It is a very, very active quality. Sefirot, therefore, are the divine personality. So one of the things that Kabbalah does is to enable us to read the Bible again with a divine personality. For heaven's sake, God gets angry, God loves, God has emotions, God is in dialogue, God is in relationship with Moses, with Israel, with Abraham, with just about everybody, with Hannah, with the prophets. I mean, so the idea of God as some kind of abstraction is very, very hard to read in the Bible. And I love this quote from William James when he is criticizing this idea of sort of just an abstract deity that doesn't react at all to the physical world or to the human condition. William James, the stagnant felicity of the absolute's perfection moves me as little as I move it. Again, the stagnant felicity of the absolute's perfection moves me as little as I move it. Yeah, okay. So I've talked about right-left energy, which is very, very important. And it can be characterized. I was reading a book by a colleague and a teacher by the name of Michael Fishbane, one of the great Judaic studies scholars of our time. And he encapsulates this creative tension as the tension between love and limits, which is a very elegant and short way to sort of encapsulate the whole thing. But there's another dynamic as well. Not only is there right and left, but there's also top and bottom. These, of course, are all metaphoric. I mean, ultimately, in the divine realm, there is no right, left, top, and bottom, but they're used for us to understand the processes that we can really barely comprehend. The upper is always on the side of bestowal. The lower is on the side of receptivity. And again, I do want to stress the fact that receptivity is very, very active. Well, I'm going to do it. Some of you may know that I love music. I don't play, I don't compose. I'm not a professional by any means, but I'm an amateur in the sense of a lover of music. And so I'm always looking for musical analogies. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm looking at the Sunday New York Times, and I see this large section about the reopening of Lincoln Center's Philharmonic Hall that used to be called Avery Fisher Hall. It got renamed for the tidy sum of David Geffen donates $100 million to renovate the hall. It seems that when it opened up, the acoustics were dead, which is an extraordinary thing for the main hall of the New York Philharmonic, the flagship orchestra, maybe of the country, certainly of New York. And what was said was that if you don't get the walls right, like the great concert halls of Europe had reverberation. That's exactly what the Kabbalists talk about with Netzach and Hod. Each, like Symphony Hall in Boston or Carnegie Hall, each wall displays numerous irregularities, like coffered ceilings and rows of statues in its interior walls. The diffusion of sound created by reflections from those objects prevents a nasty acoustic hardness or glare that smooth surfaces can generate, and so on. So it took them only 50 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to refashion completely, almost from scratch, the Great Hall. I couldn't believe this in the article. In the year 2000, the New York Philharmonic said they were going to leave Lincoln Center and go back to Carnegie Hall. And that really shook people up. Okay, this is all about the balance of expansiveness and also setting the limits, but how to limit in a way that is still cradling with love. The other dynamic is bestow and receptivity. And believe it or not, well, I wasn't so surprised. That was in the article as well. One of the things they said was that in addition to the acoustics, the hall was too big. The audience couldn't see or hear the stage. The players couldn't even hear each other sometimes. And by not being able to be heard by the audience, that diminishes the interactivity and the reciprocity of the whole process. Players sound differently. Something is evoked by the presence of the audience. So you need the receptivity. Again, malchut should not be considered passivity. That's my little warning there that I've got just a couple of minutes. Is that right, Rosa? Rosa, how many minutes do we have left? So that I'll try to. So
we have 6 minutes until we're summoned back.
Okay, so I wanted to do a little something with practice, because we're just coming off of Sukkot, and I was thinking of how much of the Kabbalah has entered into the liturgy and the ritual life of many, if not most, congregations. The idea of taking the lulav and esrog is already in the Bible. It's in Leviticus 23. It's amplified, of course, in the Talmud. There's a lot in the Midrash. You might know the symbolism about the lulav. The etrog has taste and a nice fragrance and so on. You know, there's already an interpretive tradition about the 4 species. Kabbalah goes further and again links them to the 4-letter name of God and to the Sefirot. And what happens is, when you shake the lulav and the etrog, the hadassim and the aravot, you enact the 7 lower Sefirot. There are 10 Sefirot, 10 divine manifestations. The 3 upper ones are really in the realm of will and intellect. The 7 lower ones are these emotional ones that I've been talking about love and limits and so on. So my mom, of blessed memory, I'm gonna put you on camera, right? So my wife Lori just came in. She will be a witness to this. My mom, of blessed memory, knew nothing about Kabbalah. she took the lulav and the etrog and she just shook it all around like this. And I know that she was thinking, a good year, a happy year, a healthy year for everybody. She was always say, may we all live again to be together again. Simple, straight from the heart, beautiful. My father was also not a Kabbalist, but he had gone to yeshiva, and he said, you begin by going to the east, and then you go around the 4 points of the compass, and then you go up and down. But that's not the Kabbalistic way. When I started studying Kabbalah and Hasidut, I learned from the tradition of Rabbi Isaac Luria that you begin with Chesed. You know, Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld said it so beautifully now. And it's really the motto of Hebrew College, but it can't be said too many times. At the end, it's all about opening the heart. At the end, it's all about love. So you begin with love, you begin with chesed, and you go like this. You go out to the direction of love, touching that place, and then you go into the heart, right? It's a very directed, precise movement. It's really a choreography of the hands and of the body, right? Let's say, you might say, I don't have my lulav and esrog here right now, but you see some people just sort of like poking, you know. You don't want to poke the God forbid, the person next to you in the pew, you know, with your lulav. It's you keep it vertical at all time, and you go chesed, love, to the heart, to the heart. Then you go, you need limits. Limits are not bad, limits are good. And you go to the left side and you do the same thing. Then you find tiferet, the balance, and then netzach and hod. And then you go backwards towards yesod, the foundation. Malchut, you don't actually wave to, because it is the circumambulation. It is the what is defined by the circumference of all the other modalities, just as the 7th day of the week is defined by what you do and what you don't do on the 6 days of the week. So that's just one example of how the Kabbalah can enrich your ritual life. Do you need that? No. You know, the Bible says, take a lulav and etrog, you fulfilled your mitzvah, that's perfectly fine. But to have that kavanah, to have that intentionality, really takes you to a deeper place. Rosa, let me know how I'm doing. I can keep chugging along, or I can keep.
You can keep chugging along, but if all goes according to plan, the Zoom will end in 1 minute, and we'll go back to the main room. But I say use up every precious second.
Okay. Well, so don't ask me why, but I love this quote from Philip Glass, the famous minimalist composer, who studied in Paris while he was young and really a starving musician, with 2 people, with Nadia Boulanger, the great pianist who was really on the side of Gavura. You had to hit every note exactly right.